Now let's begin. The custody paperwork sat on my kitchen table, ink still fresh from last month's signing. Joint custody. Every other weekend, plus alternating holidays. My lawyer said I was lucky to get that much. Veronica's attorney had painted me as unstable during the divorce, a man who couldn't provide the same stability as her affluent family. I'd swallowed my pride and signed because I knew the truth. My 7-year-old son needed his father in his life, even if it was only 48 hours at a time. My name is Devin McCarthy, and I'd spent 12 years as a cognitive behavioral therapist before the divorce derailed my practice. Not the kind that works in an office. I consulted for private clients, people with specific problems they couldn't solve through conventional means. Pattern recognition, behavioral prediction, psychological manipulation in negotiation. I'd helped CEOs navigate hostile takeovers, families mediate inheritance disputes, even assisted a few authors in developing psychologically accurate characters. The work was lucrative enough that Veronica had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Then she met Kenny. Kenny Hurley wasn't just her older brother. He was the golden child of the Hurley family empire. Their father had built a chain of auto dealerships across 3 states before dying of a heart attack when Veronica was 19. Kenny inherited the business at 25 and promptly drove it into the ground with cocaine-fueled mismanagement and creative accounting. By the time I married Veronica, the dealerships existed on paper only, sold off to pay debts. But the Hurleys maintained their mansion, their status, their condescending attitude toward anyone who actually worked for a living. Kenny had despised me from day one. At our wedding, he'd cornered me near the bar, whiskey drunk and sneering. "You know she's slumming it with you, right? Playing at being middle class. Give it 5 years." He'd been off by 2. The divorce came after Veronica decided my little talking business wasn't enough. She wanted the life she'd grown up with. The mansion, the country club, the summers in the Hamptons. When I couldn't provide that, she went back home to mommy. Her lawyer had evidence of an emotional affair. Emails I'd sent to a female colleague about a difficult case that Veronica's legal team spun into something tawdry. It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter. The judge awarded her primary custody. My son, Ethan, was my world. Blonde hair like his mother, but he had my eyes, sharp, observant, taking everything in. At 7, he was already showing signs of the pattern recognition that ran in my family. He'd beat me at checkers last month by predicting my moves 3 turns ahead. It was Friday evening, my weekend with Ethan. I'd planned to take him to the Science Museum tomorrow. They had a new robotics exhibit. I was preparing his favorite dinner, homemade mac and cheese with the fancy Gruyere he liked, when my phone rang. The number was Ethan's smartwatch, the one I'd bought him, so he could always reach me. My heart rate spiked even before I answered. He wasn't supposed to call during Veronica's weeks unless it was an emergency. "Daddy." His voice was small, wavering. "Ethan? What's wrong, buddy?" "I'm at Grandma Gladys's house. They won't let me use the bathroom." His breath hitched. "I've been holding it for 6 hours. Uncle Kenny keeps giving me water, and it hurts, Daddy. It hurts so much." My hand tightened around the phone. Through the line, I heard laughter, Kenny's distinctive braying laugh, the same one he'd used at my wedding when he'd made jokes about Veronica marrying down. "Mom says I need to learn discipline," Ethan whispered. They locked the bathroom door. "Uncle Kenny says I'm being a baby." More laughter, closer now. Then Kenny's voice slurred. "That's right. Tell Daddy all about it. Tell him how weak his son is. Can't even hold his piss like a man." The red haze that descended over my vision wasn't anger. It was something colder, more calculated. My therapeutic training kicked in, the same detached analysis I used to profile difficult clients. Kenny was drunk. The cruelty was escalating. This wasn't the first time. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I need you to be brave for 10 more minutes. Can you do that? I'm coming to get you right now." "They won't let me leave." "They will." I grabbed my keys. "Stay on the line with me. Don't hang up." I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the city, 40 minutes from the Hurley estate in the suburbs. I could be there in 25 if I pushed it. But I wasn't going alone, and I wasn't going unprepared. I called Jacob Washington as I headed for the parking garage. Jacob and I went back to college. He'd been pre-law before dropping out to become a private investigator. 6'4", former college linebacker, with a face that screamed, "Don't mess with me." More importantly, he was licensed to carry and had helped me with background checks on potential clients. Dev? What's up? I need you at the Hurley Mansion in 20 minutes. Bring your camera, your recorder, and come ready. Jacob knew better than to ask questions when I used that tone. On my way, I kept Ethan on the line as I drove, talking to him about anything. The museum exhibit, his favorite video game, the new comic book I'd bought for this weekend. Keeping his mind off the pain, keeping him focused on my voice. I could hear him whimpering occasionally, his 7-year-old body struggling with physical distress no child should endure. In the background, I heard Veronica's voice. Kenny, maybe we should. Shut up, Ronnie. The kid needs to learn. Your ex raised him to be soft. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, but my voice remained calm. Ethan, buddy, I'm almost there. 5 more minutes. The Hurley estate sat behind iron gates in an old money neighborhood where the houses had names instead of numbers. Willowbrook Manor, 12,000 square feet of colonial revival architecture that Gladys Hurley maintained like a museum to her dead husband's success. The gates were open, as they always were during family gatherings. I pulled up the circular driveway, gravel crunching under my tires. Jacob's black SUV pulled in behind me. He emerged, camera bag over his shoulder, his face set in the expression I recognized from our college days when he was about to hit someone on the field. What are we dealing with? He asked quietly. Child abuse. Kenny Hurley torturing my 7-year-old. Recording everything. Jacob's jaw tightened. Got it. The front door was unlocked. Another Hurley affectation. The idea that their neighborhood was so safe they didn't need to lock doors. I walked in without knocking, phone still to my ear, Jacob right behind me. The foyer was exactly as I remembered. Marble floors, a crystal chandelier, family portraits lining the walls. Voices came from the great room to the left. I followed them. The scene I walked into would be burned into my memory forever. Ethan sat on an antique chair, tears streaming down his face, his legs pressed together. His face was flushed, and I could see the trembling in his small hands. Veronica stood by the window, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable but not intervening. Gladys Hurley sat on the sofa, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, watching her grandson's distress with the same cool detachment she'd always shown me. And Kenny stood in front of Ethan with a glass of water, laughing. His shirt was untucked, his eyes glassy with alcohol. His wife, Jessie Hurley, sat nearby, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing up with a smirk. Come on, nephew, Kenny was saying. One more glass. If you can hold it another hour, maybe we'll unlock the bathroom. I stepped into the room. We're leaving. Now. Every head turned. Veronica's face went pale. Kenny's expression shifted from surprise to that familiar condescending smile. Well, the father shows up. This is my mother's house, McCarthy. You're not supposed to be here during Veronica's custody time. Jacob, I said quietly, start recording. Jacob pulled out his phone, camera already running. Recording. Timestamp, 7:47 p.m., Friday. Kenny's smile faltered. You can't. I can. This is a one-party consent state. Ethan, come here. My son bolted from the chair, running to me. I caught him, feeling his small body shaking. He buried his face in my chest, and I felt wetness, whether tears or the inevitable result of what they'd done. I didn't know and didn't care. It's okay, buddy, I murmured. Let's get you to the bathroom. The bathroom's locked, Kenny said, that smirk back. House rules. Grandma's orders. I looked at Gladys. She met my gaze coolly. The child needs to learn self-control. Veronica agrees this is necessary discipline. Discipline. I let the word hang in the air. Then I looked at Veronica. You agreed to this? She wouldn't meet my eyes. It's not. He's been having accidents at school. The therapist said. I'm a therapist, Veronica. Forcing a child to hold their bladder for 6 hours while making them drink water isn't therapy. It's torture. Don't be dramatic, Gladys said. We raised 3 children this way. And how'd that work out? I interrupted. Kenny's a drunk who destroyed his father's business. Veronica can't make a decision without asking your permission. Your youngest, what was his name? Roger? Last I heard he was in rehab for the 3rd time. Gladys's face flushed red. How dare you? Jacob, make sure you're getting all of this. Especially the part where they admit to knowingly causing harm to a minor. I looked back at Kenny. Unlock the bathroom, or I'll kick the door down. Kenny spread his arms wide. Go ahead. Property damage. I'll have you arrested. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Do it. Please. I'd love to explain to the police why I had to break down a bathroom door to let my 7-year-old urinate after 6 hours of forced fluid consumption. I'm sure the responding officers will be very understanding. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Kenny's face. Jessie looked up from her phone, sensing the shift in the room. "This is ridiculous," Veronica said, finally finding her voice. "Devin, you're overreacting." "Am I?" Jacob panned the camera to Ethan. Jacob did. My son was still trembling, his face tear-stained and flushed with pain and humiliation. "That's child abuse on video," I said quietly, along with audio of you all admitting to it. "Now, you have 2 choices. 1. Unlock the bathroom, let me take my son, and we never speak of this again. 2. I walk out of here, drive straight to the police station, file a report, and let Child Protective Services and the family courts sort this out." "You can't prove anything," Gladys said, but her voice wavered. "I have Ethan's phone call recorded. Jacob has the last 3 minutes of video. I'll have medical documentation of any physical trauma. And Ethan will tell his story to a child psychologist, who will testify that this kind of treatment constitutes abuse." I paused. "But more than that, how do you think this looks? Wealthy family tortures grandson for entertainment. Kenny Hurley, failed businessman, takes out his frustrations on a 7-year-old. That's a story the local news would love. Your country club friends would be fascinated." The room went silent. I could see the calculation in Gladys's eyes, the same cold assessment she'd always made about reputation and social standing. "Kenny, unlock the bathroom," she said quietly. "Mom." "Now." Kenny pulled a key from his pocket, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. "This isn't over, McCarthy." "It is," I said. "Because if I ever hear that you've so much as raised your voice to my son again, I won't come here calmly with a witness. I'll destroy you. All of you. And I'll do it legally, publicly, and permanently." I carried Ethan to the bathroom Kenny unlocked, waited outside while he relieved himself, the sound of his relief and soft crying breaking my heart. When he emerged, I picked him up again, not caring that he was probably too old to be carried, not caring about anything except getting him out of this house. "We're leaving," I told Jacob. As we walked toward the front door, Veronica called out, "Devin, wait." I turned. She stood in the foyer, wringing her hands. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said. "I thought. Kenny said he was just teaching him." "You thought?" My voice was flat. "You heard our son crying, and you thought it was fine? My family knows about discipline. Your family knows about cruelty. There's a difference." I adjusted Ethan in my arms. "We'll talk about this through lawyers. If you want to see Ethan again, you'll agree to supervised visitation only. Otherwise, I file for full custody on Monday with this video as evidence." Her face crumpled. "You can't. Watch me." I walked out into the cool evening air, Jacob beside me. Ethan clung to my neck, his breathing finally steadying. "My place or yours?" Jacob asked. "Mine. I need to document his condition then." I paused. "Then I need to make some calls." In my car, with Ethan buckled safely in the back seat, I looked at my friend. "Thank you. Anytime." Jacob's face was grim. "Dev, what they did. I know. You really going to take them to court?" I thought about Kenny's laughter, Veronica's complicity, Gladys's cold indifference. I thought about my son's tears and pain. "Court's too good for them," I said quietly. "But yes, I'll use it if I have to. Right now, I need to make sure Ethan's okay. Then I need to figure out exactly who the Hulleys really are." "What do you mean?" "I mean that kind of cruelty doesn't come from nowhere. And Kenny's not just a drunk. Drunk people are sloppy. This was calculated. They locked a bathroom door, forced fluid consumption, and timed it. That's systematic abuse." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "You think they've done this before?" "I know they have. To Ethan, maybe to others. And I'm going to find out everything." At my apartment, I gave Ethan a warm bath and checked him over carefully. No bruising, but there was some redness that concerned me. I documented everything with photos, noting times and observations. I fed him the mac and cheese I'd made earlier, and he ate mechanically, still quiet. After he was in my bed, because he didn't want to be alone, I sat in my living room with Jacob and a bottle of bourbon. "What's the play?" Jacob asked. I pulled out my laptop. "Research. I want to know everything about the Hulleys. Their finances, their business dealings, their social connections. Everything. Looking for leverage? Looking for truth. And yes, leverage." I typed in the first search. Kenny destroyed his father's business, but the Hullys still live like they're wealthy. Where's the money coming from? Maybe Gladys had separate investments? Maybe. Or maybe there's something else. I pulled up public records. Start with property records. Who owns that mansion? Then we'll look at tax liens, business filings, anything public. Jacob opened his own laptop. This is going to take all night. I've got time. I'm not sleeping anyway. As we worked, a picture began to emerge. The Hurley mansion was mortgaged to the hilt. Gladys received Social Security and a small pension from her late husband, but it wasn't enough to maintain the property. Veronica had no income. She'd never worked. Kenny listed himself as a business consultant, but his LLC had no clients and reported minimal income. So, where's the money coming from? Jacob muttered. I dug deeper. Tax records showed that Gladys had sold several properties over the years, always at below-market rates to the same buyer, a company called Horizon Development LLC. I searched for Horizon. Dummy corporation. Registered in Delaware, minimal information available. But there was a lawsuit, a former employee claiming wrongful termination. In the court filings, the employee alleged that Horizon was a shell company used for insurance fraud. Insurance fraud, I said slowly. Jacob looked up. What? Gladys's husband, Martin Hurley, died of a heart attack. But before that, he'd taken out massive life insurance policies. Policies that paid out to Gladys. I pulled up the death certificate. 6 months after he died, Gladys started selling properties to Horizon at a loss. Money laundering? Or repayment? What if the heart attack wasn't natural? Jacob stared at me. That's a hell of a leap, Dev. Is it? Martin built a successful business. Kenny destroyed it in 5 years. What if Kenny did something to speed along his father's death to get the insurance money and the business? What if Gladys helped him? You can't prove that. Not yet. But I can investigate. I made a note. And even if I can't prove murder, I can prove fraud. Insurance fraud, tax evasion, whatever they're hiding. Jacob leaned back. This isn't about custody anymore, is it? I thought about Ethan's tears, his pain, his humiliation. I thought about the cruelty in Kenny's eyes, the calculation in Gladys's expression. No, I said. It's about making sure they never hurt anyone again. Saturday morning, I took Ethan to Dr. Bernard Barnes, a pediatrician I trusted. Bernie had testified in custody cases before. His documentation was thorough and unimpeachable. He examined Ethan gently, asked careful questions, and wrote a detailed report that I immediately scanned and saved in multiple locations. This is abuse, Devin, Bernie said quietly while Ethan played with toys in the waiting room. Clear cut. The physical stress, the psychological manipulation, I'll testify to that if needed. Thank you. I might need you to. Bernie handed me the report. I'm also filing a mandated reporter notification with Child Protective Services. You understand that's not optional. I do, and I appreciate it. With Bernie's report in hand, I spent the afternoon with Ethan at the Science Museum as planned, trying to give him some normalcy. He perked up at the robotics exhibit, asking questions and laughing at the demonstrations. But I caught him looking over his shoulder occasionally, as if expecting Kenny to appear. That night, after Ethan was asleep, I called my lawyer, Don Harding, a family law specialist who'd handled my divorce. He listened to my summary without interrupting. You want full custody, Don said when I finished. Sole physical custody, supervised visitation only for Veronica, and a restraining order against the Hullys. The video and doctor's report will help. But Devin, you need to understand, judges are reluctant to completely terminate a mother's custodial rights unless there's extreme circumstances. What they did to Ethan is extreme. Agreed. But Veronica's lawyer will argue she wasn't the primary actor. She'll throw her brother under the bus, claim she tried to stop it, but was overruled by her mother. That's bullshit. She stood there and watched. I know, and we'll argue that. But be prepared for a fight. The Hullys have resources. So do I. Money. Information. They're hiding something, Dawn. Financial crimes, possibly worse. I'm going to find it, and when I do, I'm going to use it. Dawn was quiet for a moment. Devin, be careful. If you go after them illegally, everything I'm doing is legal. Public records, licensed investigators, legitimate research. I'm not breaking any laws. Just don't cross the line. You'll lose Ethan if you do. After hanging up with Dawn, I opened my laptop again. Jacob had sent over more research, Financial records he'd obtained through legal channels, corporate filings, newspaper archives. I started building a timeline. 1998. Martin Hurley purchases 3 auto dealerships. Business thrives. 2003. Martin takes out $5 million in life insurance. Names Gladys as beneficiary. 2005. Martin dies of heart attack at age 58. Autopsy shows elevated potassium levels, attributed to cardiac event. 2006. Gladys receives $5 million payout. Kenny takes over business. 2007 to 2011. Business declines sharply. Dealerships sold at significant losses. 2012. Gladys begins selling properties to Horizon Development. 2015 present. Hurleys maintain lifestyle inconsistent with reported income. The timeline raised questions. Why would a healthy 58-year-old suddenly die of a heart attack? Elevated potassium could be natural, or it could be induced. Potassium chloride was undetectable in autopsies if you weren't specifically looking for it. But that was 17 years ago. Even if I was right, proving it would be impossible, unless there was a witness. I thought about the Hurley family structure. Martin and Gladys had 3 children, Kenny, Veronica, and Roger. Roger, the youngest, currently in his 3rd stint at rehab. What had driven Roger to addiction? Family dysfunction certainly, but maybe something more specific. Maybe guilt. Maybe knowledge. I pulled up Roger's information. He was at a facility called Serenity Pines in upstate New York, 48 years old, with a history of cocaine and alcohol addiction dating back to his 20s. His first rehab stint had been in 2006, right after his father's death. Interesting timing. I made a note to contact Roger. If anyone knew the Hurley family secrets, it would be the black sheep who'd spent 20 years trying to forget them. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. McCarthy? A woman's voice, professional. This is Linda Chun from Child Protective Services. I'm calling regarding the report filed by Dr. Bernard Barnes concerning your son, Ethan McCarthy. Yes, I was expecting your call. I need to schedule a home visit and an interview with Ethan. Given the nature of the allegations, we're treating this as a priority case. Are you available tomorrow? Absolutely. We scheduled the visit for Sunday afternoon. After hanging up, I felt a grim satisfaction. The wheels were turning. CPS would investigate. Don would file for emergency custody modification, and the Hurleys would have to defend their actions in court. But court was slow. Justice was uncertain. And I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted them to feel what Ethan had felt. I wanted them to understand the consequences of their cruelty. I wanted them destroyed, not just defeated. And I was going to make that happen. Sunday's CPS visit went exactly as expected. Linda Chun was thorough and kind with Ethan, who told her everything in heartbreaking detail. She interviewed me, reviewed Bernie's medical report and Jacob's video, and made careful notes. Before leaving, she told me she'd be visiting the Hurley residence as well and would file her findings with the family court. Monday morning, Don filed an emergency motion for custody modification and a temporary restraining order against Kenny Hurley. By Monday afternoon, Veronica's lawyer had called with a settlement offer. Veronica would agree to supervised visitation if I dropped the restraining order request and didn't pursue criminal charges. Tell them no, I said. Full sole custody, supervised visits, and Kenny doesn't come within 500 feet of Ethan. Non-negotiable. They won't agree. Then we'll see them in court. And Don, make sure the local press knows about the hearing. Public record, public interest. Don chuckled darkly. You're playing hardball. They tortured my son. This is me being restrained. Tuesday, I received a threatening call from Kenny himself. You're destroying this family, McCarthy, he slurred. Drinking before noon, I noted. Veronica's falling apart. Mom's being investigated by social services. You happy now? Ask me again when you're in handcuffs. You think you're so smart. You think you can come into our lives and... I didn't come into your lives. Veronica brought me in, then you all spent 10 years treating me like garbage. I tolerated it for her sake. But you touched my son. You hurt him. And now you're going to pay for that. You can't. I can. And I will. This is just the beginning, Kenny. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd just unlocked that bathroom door. I hung up before he could respond. Then I called Jacob. Need a favor. I want surveillance on the Hurley house. Cameras. Audio if you can manage it legally. I want to know everyone who comes and goes. That's expensive. I'll pay. Just do it. Dev, what are you planning? Justice. The kind the courts won't deliver. Jacob was quiet. Don't do anything stupid. I won't do anything illegal. But stupid? Kenny Hurley's about to find out exactly how smart I can be. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In that time, I worked methodically. I hired Jacob to conduct full surveillance. I reviewed every piece of information I could find on the Hulleys. And I started making connections. Horizon Development LLC, the company buying Gladys's properties, was owned by a man named Saul O'Neill. O'Neill had a criminal record, insurance fraud from the 1990s, served 3 years in federal prison. After his release, he'd started Horizon and made a career out of buying distressed properties, claiming excessive damages, and collecting insurance payouts. If Gladys was working with O'Neill, she was complicit in fraud. And if Kenny knew, which he had to, given his role in the family finances, he was complicit too. I needed proof. Not just public records, but actual evidence of the fraud. That meant getting inside their operation, which meant getting close to someone in the know. Jessie Hurley, Kenny's wife, was the weak link. She'd married into the family 5 years ago, a former cocktail waitress who'd seen Kenny as her ticket to wealth. But the wealth was an illusion, and based on the surveillance footage Jacob collected, Jessie was unhappy. She argued with Kenny frequently, left the house for hours at a time, and met regularly with a man who definitely wasn't her husband at a hotel downtown. An affair. Perfect leverage. I had Jacob get photos. Clear, undeniable photos of Jessie and her companion, a younger man, muscular, clearly not paying for the hotel room himself. Then I prepared my approach. Wednesday afternoon, I followed Jessie to her regular nail appointment at an upscale salon. I waited until she was done, then intercepted her in the parking lot. "Mrs. Hurley?" "Jessie." She turned, startled, then recognized me. Her face hardened. "I have nothing to say to you." "That's fine. I have something to show you." I held up my phone with one of Jacob's photos. "Nice hotel. The Grandview, right? They have excellent room service." Her face went white. "Where did you can't." "Relax. I'm not interested in your affair. I'm interested in what you know about Kenny's business dealings." "I don't know anything." "Yes, you do. You've been married to him for 5 years. You know about Horizon Development, about the insurance fraud, about whatever scheme the Hulleys are running to maintain their lifestyle." I put my phone away. "Here's the situation. I'm taking the Hulleys down. I will expose their fraud, their abuse, everything. You can either go down with them, or you can help me and walk away clean." Jessie looked around nervously. "Kenny would kill me. Kenny's going to have bigger problems than you. The choice is simple. Loyalty to a family that treats you like garbage, or self-preservation." She bit her lip. "What do you want?" "Information. Documents, emails, recorded conversations, anything that proves what they're doing." "And if I give you this, you'll what? Delete the photos?" "I'll do better than that. I'll make sure that when this all goes public, you're positioned as a victim who cooperated with authorities. Jessie Hurley, the brave woman who exposed her husband's crimes. You'll come out looking sympathetic, maybe even heroic. And the affair stays between us, unless it becomes relevant to the case, which I doubt." She studied me for a long moment. "You really hate them, don't you?" "No. Hate is what they do. I just believe in consequences." Jessie pulled out her phone. "I have copies of everything. Kenny's too arrogant to hide his files properly. Tax returns, emails with O'Neill, even some recordings of him and Gladys discussing the insurance payouts." She looked up. "I've been planning to leave him anyway. This just speeds up my timeline." Smart woman. Not smart enough to avoid marrying him in the first place. She tapped her screen. "I'll send you everything. But I want immunity in writing before I testify to anything. I'll have my lawyer draw up an agreement. You work with the authorities, provide evidence against Kenny and Gladys, and you walk away with immunity plus a favorable divorce settlement. Deal." She sent the files right there in the parking lot. Hundreds of documents, emails, audio recordings. As I watched them download to my encrypted cloud storage, I felt the pieces clicking into place. "Why are you doing this?" Jessie asked. "I mean, I know what Kenny did to your son was horrible, but this seems like more than just revenge." I thought about how to answer. "My son is 7 years old. They hurt him because they could, because they thought there wouldn't be consequences. If I let that stand, what does that teach him? That cruelty wins. That power trumps justice." I shook my head. "No. He's going to learn that actions have consequences. That monsters don't get to hide behind money and status. That his father will always protect him. Jesse nodded slowly. I hope you destroy them. I will. That night, I sat with Jacob in my apartment, reviewing Jesse's files. The evidence was damning. Kenny and O'Neill had been running insurance scams for years, buying damaged properties through Gladys's name, claiming excessive damages, collecting insurance payouts, then flipping the properties at profit. They'd made millions, all of it carefully laundered through shell companies and offshore accounts. But there was more. Emails from 2005, right before Martin Hurley's death. Kenny discussing his father's life insurance, how it would solve all our problems. Gladys responding that Martin's health is declining, even though Martin's medical records showed he was in perfect health. And then, an email from Kenny to someone named Dr. Vince. Make sure it looks natural. Heart attack, nothing suspicious. Dr. Vince. I searched the name against medical licensing boards. Dr. Vince Shepard, a physician who'd lost his license in 2007 for prescribing unnecessary medications and falsifying medical records. Last known address. Deceased, 2010, overdose. Dead end, literally. But the email was enough to raise serious questions. This is conspiracy to commit murder, Jacob said quietly. It's an email that could be interpreted that way, I corrected. Not enough for criminal charges, but enough to destroy their reputation, especially combined with the fraud. What's the play? I leaned back, thinking. We go to the FBI, White-Collar Crimes Division. Give them everything on the insurance fraud. That's federal jurisdiction, and it's airtight. While they're investigating that, I leak the murder conspiracy to the press. Let public opinion destroy what the law can't prove. That's scorched earth, Dev. They tortured my son. Scorched earth is merciful. The FBI was interested. Special Agent Peter Becker, a veteran of the White-Collar Crimes Division, reviewed our evidence and immediately opened an investigation. He couldn't comment on the murder conspiracy. Too old, too difficult to prove. But the fraud case was solid. We'll need Mrs. Hurley's testimony, Becker said. She's willing. I'll have her lawyer contact you. And you're doing this because they hurt my son. And because the law should apply to everyone equally, rich or poor. Becker studied me. You're not doing this for money. You're not trying to leverage a settlement. You genuinely want to see them prosecuted. I want to see them in prison, where they belong. He nodded. Then we'll make that happen. The custody hearing came before the FBI could move. Veronica showed up with a new lawyer, a shark named Rita Connors who tried to paint me as vindictive and unstable. But Don had our evidence. Bernie's medical report, Jacob's video, CPS findings that substantiated abuse, and character witnesses who testified to my fitness as a parent. The judge listened to both sides, then asked to speak with Ethan in chambers. 30 minutes later, she emerged with my son, whose hand she held gently. I've reviewed the evidence and spoken with the minor child, Judge Sarah Ortiz said. It is the finding of this court that the events of Friday evening constitute child abuse and neglect. Mrs. McCarthy is found to have failed in her duty to protect her son from harm. Accordingly, sole physical and legal custody is awarded to Mr. McCarthy. Mrs. McCarthy will have supervised visitation 2 hours per week at a location to be approved by Mr. McCarthy. Furthermore, a restraining order is hereby issued against Kenneth Hurley, Gladys Hurley, and Jessica Hurley, prohibiting any contact with the minor child. Veronica burst into tears. Her lawyer immediately began arguing for an appeal. But the judge's decision was final, at least for now. I took Ethan's hand. He looked up at me with those sharp eyes and whispered, "Are we going home now, Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy. We're going home." As we walked out of the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Someone had tipped them off, probably Don's office. I gave a brief statement about justice for abused children, carefully avoiding specifics that might jeopardize the FBI investigation. But I made sure to mention the Hurley name, to plant seeds of doubt in the public consciousness. That night, the local news ran the story. Prominent family accused of child abuse. Father wins custody. It was the beginning of the end for the Hurleys' social standing. 3 days later, FBI agents raided the Hurley mansion with warrants. They seized computers, documents, financial records. Kenny was arrested on federal fraud charges. Gladys, too old and frail for immediate arrest, was served with a subpoena. Jessie, true to her word, testified before a grand jury. Her testimony, combined with the documentary evidence, led to indictments for insurance fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. The press had a field day. Fallen dynasty, Hurley family empire built on fraud. The society pages that had once featured Gladys at charity galas now showed photos of her mansion being searched by federal agents. But I wasn't satisfied. Kenny and Gladys would go to prison, yes. But what about Martin's death? What about 17 years of suspicion and unanswered questions? I needed Roger. The black sheep. The addict. The one who might have seen something, known something. I called Serenity Pines and asked to speak with Roger Hurley. Roger agreed to meet me at a diner halfway between his facility and the city. I drove up on a gray Saturday afternoon, leaving Ethan with Jacob for the day. The diner was a truck stop special, all chrome and formica and coffee that tasted like it had been sitting since the Carter administration. Roger was waiting in a back booth. 48, but looking 60, with thinning hair and the telltale broken capillaries of long-term drinking. His hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "Mr. McCarthy," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. "I've been following the news. I appreciate you meeting me. Couldn't believe it when I heard Kenny was arrested. Mom, too." He laughed bitterly. "Actually, that's a lie. I could absolutely believe it. Surprised it took this long. Roger, I need to ask you about your father's death." His hands stilled. "Why?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the email between Kenny and Dr. Shepard. "Because I think it wasn't natural." Roger read the email, his face going pale. Then he set down his coffee and stared out the window for a long moment. "I was 24 when Dad died," he said finally. "Fresh out of college, working at the dealership. Dad was grooming me to take over eventually, not Kenny. Kenny was the oldest, but Dad didn't trust him. Said he was too impulsive, too greedy. What happened? Dad had a fight with Kenny and Mom. About money, about the business. Kenny wanted to expand, take on debt, make risky investments. Dad refused. The fight got ugly. Kenny stormed out. Roger's voice dropped. 3 days later, Dad had his heart attack. You suspected something. I didn't want to. But yeah, Dad was healthy. Worked out every day, watched his diet. And then suddenly dead at 58. He shook his head. I asked questions. Mom shut me down. Kenny told me I was being paranoid. I started drinking to cope with the guilt of not pushing harder. The guilt of suspecting your mother and brother of murder. Roger flinched. I never said that out loud. Never even let myself think it clearly. But yeah, I found Dr. Shepard's records. He prescribed medication to your father in the weeks before his death. Medication Dad didn't need. What kind of medication? Potassium supplements. Large doses. Supposedly for a heart condition that Dad's regular cardiologist has no record of. Roger closed his eyes. Oh God. Excess potassium can cause cardiac arrest. It's almost impossible to detect in an autopsy unless you're specifically looking for it. And Dr. Shepard lost his license 2 years later for falsifying records. They killed him. Roger's voice was barely a whisper. My mother and brother killed my father for insurance money. I can't prove it. Not beyond reasonable doubt. Dr. Shepard is dead. The autopsy is 17 years old. But I believe it happened. Roger looked at me with haunted eyes. What do you want from me? The truth. Whatever you remember, whatever you saw. On record, for the FBI. They'll never be convicted for Dad's murder. You said yourself there's no proof. No. But they'll know that I know. That you know. That the world suspects. And that knowledge, that doubt, that stigma, it will follow them for the rest of their lives. I leaned forward. Kenny's going to prison for fraud. When he gets out, if he gets out, he'll be a convicted felon with a cloud of murder suspicion over his head. Gladys will die knowing her legacy is destroyed. That's justice, even if it's not a conviction. Roger was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. I have something, he said. I've had it for 17 years. Never knew what to do with it. He showed me a video file. Date stamp. October 2005, a week before Martin's death. The video showed Martin Hurley in his home office, recording what looked like a confession or a will. If you're watching this, Martin's voice said, something's happened to me. I need you to know, I've discovered something about Kenny and Gladys. Financial irregularities in the business, documents that suggest they've been stealing from the dealerships. I confronted them tonight. Kenny threatened me, said I'd regret not giving him control. The video cut off abruptly. Dad sent this to me the day before he died, Roger said. Email with instructions to watch it if anything happened to him. I was too scared to do anything with it. Too young, too weak. I buried it and tried to forget. May I have a copy? Roger sent it immediately. Will this help? It establishes motive and consciousness of guilt. Combined with everything else, it paints a picture. Not enough for murder charges, but enough for the court of public opinion. Roger nodded slowly. Good. They deserve everything coming to them. One more thing. Would you be willing to testify about what you witnessed? The fights, the suspicious timing, Dad's video? If it helps bury them? Absolutely. We talked for another hour. Roger told me everything. The family dynamics, Kenny's cruelty growing up, Gladys's cold manipulation, the way they'd ostracized him when he started asking questions about Martin's death. By the time we parted ways, I had a complete picture of the Hurley family's rot, and I knew exactly how to finish this. The federal trial for the fraud charges took 6 months to prepare. During that time, Kenny and Gladys's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. Jesse's testimony, the documents, the financial records, all of it painted a clear picture of conspiracy and theft. The trial itself was a media circus. I attended every day, Ethan safely at school or with Jacob. I watched as Jesse testified, as FBI agents explained the money trail, as Kenny's arrogance finally crumbled under cross-examination. On the 10th day of trial, Dawn called me with news. Veronica wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. She looked haggard, 20 pounds thinner, her hair dull. The woman who'd once prided herself on appearances looked broken. I've lost everything, she said without preamble. My family's going to prison. I have no money. Dad's estate is being seized. I barely see my son. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. You won. This wasn't about winning, wasn't it? You destroyed us. No, you destroyed yourselves. I just made sure there were consequences. She was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry for what happened to Ethan. I should have protected him. Yes, you should have. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about that question carefully. I don't know, but I don't need to forgive you to co-parent effectively. Ethan deserves to know his mother, if his mother can be the person he needs. What does that mean? It means if you want to be in his life, you need to prove you've changed. Therapy, cutting ties with Kenny and Gladys completely, building your own life. Do that, and we can talk about expanding visitation. She nodded slowly. I'll try. Don't try. Do it. For Ethan. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. Kenny received 15 years in federal prison. Gladys, given her age and health, received 8 years with a recommendation for medical facility placement. As they were led away in handcuffs, Kenny looked at me across the courtroom. I met his gaze steadily. No triumph, no gloating, just the certainty that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I gave a brief statement thanking the FBI and the jury, then added, "This case is about more than financial crimes. It's about accountability. No family, no matter how prominent, is above the law, and no child should ever suffer abuse in silence." That night, I sat with Ethan and explained what had happened in age-appropriate terms. Uncle Kenny and Grandma did bad things, I told him. They hurt people, including you. Now they have to go away for a while to think about what they did. Are they going to jail? Ethan asked. Yes. Good. His voice was matter of fact, no malice, just the simple logic of a 7-year-old who understood consequences. They were mean to me. They were, and it was wrong. But you're safe now. I know, Daddy, because you protect me. I pulled him into a hug, feeling the weight of everything we'd been through. Always, buddy, always. 3 months later, I received a call from Roger. He'd been sober for 120 days, attending meetings regularly, working through his trauma in therapy. I wanted to thank you, he said, for giving me the courage to finally tell the truth about our family. You found that courage yourself. I just provided an opportunity. Still, I'm thinking about writing a book. About Dad, about growing up in that family, about everything. Would you be okay with that? It's your story, Roger. Tell it however you need to. The book came out a year later. The Golden Cage, Growing Up Hurley. It was a bestseller, a searing indictment of toxic family dynamics, abuse, and the price of secrets. Roger donated all proceeds to organizations fighting child abuse. Jessie divorced Kenny while he was in prison and moved to California. Last I heard, she was working as a victim's advocate, helping other women escape abusive relationships. Veronica completed a year of intensive therapy and slowly rebuilt her relationship with Ethan. She got a job, her first ever, as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. She'd never be wealthy again, but she seemed happier, more grounded. Ethan saw her every weekend now, unsupervised, and while I stayed vigilant, she seemed genuinely changed. As for me, I rebuilt my practice. Clients who'd left during the divorce drama came back, impressed by how I'd handled the Hurley situation. I became known as someone who fought for justice, who didn't back down, who protected the vulnerable. But more importantly, I was Ethan's father. Full-time, permanent, undisputed. I coached his soccer team, helped with homework, attended every school event. I taught him chess and watched him beat me with strategies I'd never seen coming. I showed him that strength wasn't about cruelty. It was about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. One evening, 2 years after that horrible phone call, Ethan and I sat on the couch watching a movie. During a commercial, he looked up at me. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Always." "That day when I called you from Grandma's house, how did you know what to do?" I thought about how to answer. I didn't, not entirely. But I knew I had to protect you. Everything else, the investigation, the trial, all of it, came from that simple fact. You're my son, and I'll always fight for you. Because you love me, because I love you, and because it was the right thing to do. He nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to the movie. A few minutes later, he said quietly, "I'm glad you're my dad." I pulled him closer. "I'm glad you're my son." Later that night, after Ethan was asleep, I stood in his doorway watching him breathe peacefully. No nightmares anymore. No fear. Just a happy kid who knew he was loved and protected. Kenny Hurley was in year 3 of his sentence, his appeals exhausted. Gladys had died in prison 6 months ago, her health finally failing. The Hurley mansion had been sold at auction, the proceeds going to restitution for their fraud victims. The family that had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, was gone. Destroyed not by violence or illegal revenge, but by their own actions coming to light. By the simple application of law and consequences. And somewhere in the wreckage, a 7-year-old boy had learned that his father would move heaven and earth to keep him safe. That cruelty didn't win. That justice, though sometimes slow, was real. That was my victory. Not the prison sentences or the financial ruin, but Ethan's peaceful sleep, his confidence, his knowledge that he mattered. Everything else was just details. I closed his door quietly and went to my own room. Tomorrow we'd go to the park, maybe get ice cream, just enjoy being father and son. The past was settled. The future was ours. And that was exactly how it should be. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.